It began as a normal April morning at Clearstone High School in 1989, where seniors of Class 89 had just begun to settle into their last semester, excited, distracted, dreaming of summer, of graduation, of the future that now would never come, because at 10:07 a.m., the fire alarm blared across the corridors like a mechanical shriek, and students, 134 in total, were evacuated onto the football field as part of a routine drill, but somewhere between the classroom doors and the lawn, 32 students, all from the senior class, vanished without a trace. Eyewitnesses claimed they'd seen them head toward the east hallway, near the old gym wing under renovation, but security footage showed nothing, no sign of them turning any corner, as if they'd been swallowed by the walls themselves. The town of Ivydale erupted into panic. Police combed every inch of the school, helicopters scanned the nearby woods, and parents gathered outside the building, crying, screaming, demanding answers. But no remains, no signs, no clothing, nothing ever surfaced. The case turned cold within months, and the school quietly shut down the following year, declared unsound and spiritually unsafe by local clergy who claimed something never left those halls. 3 decades passed, and no one truly spoke of it again, until 2024 when Nora Tills, a 38-year-old archivist and daughter of one of the missing students, returned to Ivydale after receiving a plain brown envelope at her apartment in Cincinnati. No return address, no sender, only a single photograph inside, grainy and warped, showing 32 shadowed figures inside a brick hallway, backs turned, heads tilted unnaturally to one side, and a handwritten note below. "They're not gone, they're just waiting inside." Nora felt her skin crawl, not only because of the strange photo, but because she recognized one of the figures, the shape of his shoulders, the hair curl at the nape of his neck. It was her father, Jeremy Tills, frozen in time at 17, still wearing his red varsity jacket with a faded C stitched above the heart. She returned to Clearstone with a single goal: to open whatever doors had been sealed, to follow the same path her father and his classmates took on that cursed day. The school stood abandoned, half-eaten by vines and time, but as she stepped inside, a cold wind rushed past her, and from the cracked intercom, a static burst hissed, followed by a faint, ghostly echo. "Line up quietly, single file, follow the wall." Nora's breath caught. The same instruction given during that drill, a protocol that no longer existed. Her flashlight flickered as she moved down the east hallway, the same one mentioned in the reports, and as she passed the sealed gym doors, something scraped behind them, not like an animal, but something slow, something dragging, something heavy. She pressed her ear to the door and heard a whisper so low she wasn't sure it was real. "We've been waiting for you." Her legs locked, her hands trembled, and for a brief moment she smelled smoke. Not fresh, but old, thick, buried in bricks, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath for decades. She turned and saw that the exit she came from was gone. Just smooth wall behind her now, like the building was rearranging itself, bending time back into itself, and then one by one, the lights above her turned off, and from the shadows ahead, footsteps began to echo. Synchronized like a marching line of students, and the voices of teenagers murmured things no adult should ever hear. Things about fire, about doors that open but never close, about teachers who weren't human at all, and about drills that weren't practice but sacrifice. Nora backed into a supply closet and slammed the door, heart racing, and inside, she found a box marked Class of '89 filled with tapes, photographs, and something worse. A binder with the school's original floor plan, and drawn in red ink was a hallway that didn't exist on any map, labeled simply The Loop. She realized this wasn't an accident, it was a design. Someone made this happen, and someone had done it before. Now, trapped in a place that rearranged itself, with names echoing from the vents and handprints appearing on glass that no one touched, Nora knew she had to keep moving forward. Not just for her father, but because whatever existed inside this school was waking up again, and she was no longer just a visitor. She was part of the story, part of the list, part of the class now. Nora didn't sleep that night, not because she didn't try, but because every time she closed her eyes, the hallway echoed, not with sound but with that photograph, that impossible photograph, where the silhouettes stood still, their backs turned, as if caught in a moment between life and something colder, something unfinished. And when she enlarged the photo on her phone, zoomed in past the pixelation and age, her breath caught, because the person in the red jacket, third from the left, was her cousin Jamie, who vanished during the '89 drill along with the rest of his class. And Nora remembered the backyard barbecues, the way he used to climb trees without looking down, the way he wore that same red jacket every damn day, even in June, and now somehow in 2024, he was inside this photograph, standing inside a hallway that shouldn't exist anymore. That entire wing of Clearstone High had been closed off, sealed, condemned, and demolished supposedly, after mold outbreaks and structural damage. But when she checked city records, the permits were never finalized, no inspections completed, just a quiet removal from public maps and a memo stamped internal hazard. And that made her skin crawl because it wasn't mold that could keep a space hidden for 35 years. It was something else, something deeper, and she knew she had to go back, not just to look, but to really see what no one else dared to. So at 3 a.m., armed with 2 flashlights, a thermal camera she borrowed from a ghost-chasing subreddit group, and the same envelope taped shut in her coat pocket, she parked behind the remains of the school, pushed through the collapsed fencing, and made her way to the gym door again, the one that hadn't been used since before she was born, but this time it wasn't locked. It opened slowly like it had been waiting for her, the hinges whispering, instead of creaking, and the air inside smelled like chalk and wet paper and old secrets. And as she stepped in, the thermal camera flared briefly, then went black, battery dead despite being fully charged, and her regular flashlight flickered once before settling into a steady glow, revealing a long hallway lined with faded lockers, many dented, some slightly ajar, and every few feet, she saw names scratched in metal: Amanda W., Devin L., Jamie N., names that belonged to the missing students, as if they had written themselves into the walls. And that's when the intercom above her crackled, alive with static, followed by a single voice, robotic and warped but unmistakably a child's, saying "Line up," followed by silence, and the lights overhead flickered, not erratically but in sequence, like guiding her, leading her, deeper into the corridor that shouldn't exist, and Nora followed, pulse thudding, hands trembling but steady, until she reached what looked like an old homeroom, door open. Desk still in place, untouched, and sitting in the center of the teacher's desk was a cassette tape labeled Drill Beta Set 3, and when she touched it, the intercom sparked again, this time playing a looped sound of a school bell, a fire drill bell over and over, but each chime got slower, deeper, more distorted, and then came the whispers, low and layered, dozens of voices overlapping but one phrase clear among them: "Still waiting." And Nora dropped the tape, heart slamming against her ribs, because the sound wasn't coming from the intercom anymore. It was coming from the walls, from behind the dry plaster, and she pressed her ear to the surface and heard footsteps, like students walking in single file. Then a handprint bloomed across the wall, palm-sized, fresh, as if someone had touched it from the inside, and that's when she turned and saw movement at the end of the hallway, a figure in a red jacket, walking slowly toward the corner, head tilted, back still turned, and she ran after it, calling Jamie's name, flashlight beam shaking, bouncing off the walls. But when she turned the corner, there was no one, only a locker door wide open and a Polaroid sitting inside, one from the 1989 yearbook shoot, except the backdrop wasn't the usual gym wall. It was the same hallway she was standing in, but older, dustier, more warped, and the students inside the photo weren't smiling. They were staring directly at the lens, unsmiling, eyes wide, and someone had scratched over their faces, leaving only hollow outlines, and in the corner, written in blue ink, were the words "We never left." And Nora backed away, suddenly nauseous, the air growing heavier, thicker, like being underwater, and as she stumbled toward the exit, every locker door along the hall snapped open one by one, metal clanging, echoing like a countdown, and then came the bell again, loud, distorted, final. And she ran until the cold air hit her face outside, gasping, clutching the cassette and the photo, knowing she couldn't stop now, not when something inside that building still remembered them, still waited, and maybe, just maybe, wanted out. If you're still following this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below what you think happened during that fire drill, because we're just getting started. Nora didn't sleep that night, not really. The cassette tape replayed in her mind again and again, the same unsettling rhythm of sirens, the children's voices chanting the command, "Line up" for the sequence, followed by silence, and then faint knocking, rhythmic, almost desperate. It wasn't just audio, it felt like a code, a buried scream, and something inside her shifted. Some deep-rooted part that knew the line between ordinary and wrong had been crossed long ago. By morning she had already printed new copies of the student list from 1989 and circled 10 names that appeared twice, once as enrolled students, and once under a faculty access sheet dated 3 months after the fire drill, which shouldn't exist at all. She drove back to Clearstone High's remains with a crowbar and her phone camera ready, telling no one this time, not even her contact at the archives, because now the questions were too dangerous, not just for her, but for whoever had kept this school hidden beneath a veil of fire incident. As she reached the back wing of the school that had partially collapsed, she noticed something peculiar. The broken bricks near the north-facing wall were warm to the touch, faintly buzzing, almost pulsing like a slow heartbeat. She pried one loose and found it was hollow behind, not a wall but a seal, and behind it was a narrow passage, sloping downward into blackness. Lined with old metal insulation panels and tarnished pipes, the air smelled of old paper, copper, and something sweeter, almost like burnt sugar and decay. She turned on her phone light and moved in, her footsteps muffled, walls closing in, until she found the first door. It was iron, marked B13, and had no handle, only a scanner and keypad, both clearly dead from age, but the wall beside it had scratch marks, deep ones, like someone had tried to claw their way out. She backed away, heart pounding, when she heard it again. Footsteps behind her, fast, echoing, bare feet slapping the floor. She spun around, nothing, only dust, and then the voice of a young boy whispered from the dark, "You're not supposed to be here," and the light on her phone flickered, then shut off completely, leaving her in silence except for a mechanical hum growing louder from the direction of the door, then a low tone, like a power cycle rebooting, and the keypad lit up for a moment, displaying 3 characters, "Set," before shorting out again. Nora crawled backward until she reached the broken wall and exited fast, coughing in the open air, the sky above still gray and churning, like something watching, and the school around her seemed to groan, deep in its foundation, like it was remembering something too. That night she uploaded the footage and saved it to 3 hard drives, mailed 2 to safe contacts, and then sat in silence staring at the last image she caught before her light died. A single child's drawing etched into the passage wall. 3 kids holding hands, with black eyes and mouths drawn like static spirals, and below them, in trembling block letters, "They're still in the drill." The next morning, she visited the home of Celia Rayburn, the only surviving teacher from the 1989 roster, now in a nursing facility, and showed her the drawing without saying a word. The woman's eyes widened instantly and she whispered, "They told us not to look, they said the walls were for safety." Nora pressed further. But Celia began to cry and kept repeating, "We locked them in, didn't we? We locked them all in." Her hands trembled so violently she dropped the photo. And behind her, the old radio on the desk suddenly crackled to life, a familiar sound pattern from the cassette tape playing faintly, and then silence. When Nora picked up the photo again, she noticed something. On the back, in faint faded ink, was a number, 289B, and a phrase, "Last sequence failed." Echo loop maintained. That night, Nora returned to the school once more, this time determined to reach room B13 fully. This time determined to reach room B13 fully. Nora didn't sleep that night. She just sat in her car parked outside the ruins of Danforth High, replaying Celia Rayburn's final whispered words in her head. They never got out, none of them did, but the school wanted clean headlines and clean graves. Her hand trembled as she clutched the voice recorder, still blinking, still alive. Despite Celia's breath having stopped long before the last sentence was even finished, by morning Nora was back inside, ducking through the gym's side entrance where the floor had caved into a blackened pit, smoke stains still clinging to the walls after all these years. But now there was a sound, faint at first, like a hallway intercom crackling to life and humming a tone that no system this broken should be able to emit. She followed it past collapsed lockers and burned out trophy cases until she reached the old AV room where rows of VHS tapes had fused into one melted mass. But one, just one, sat neatly on top of the real deck, unlabeled and still warm to the touch, as if someone had just placed it there. She slid it in, and the static flared. Then an image appeared, grainy, colorless, but unmistakable. The courtyard, the fire drill, the students lining up in 1989, seen from above like security footage, and then a pause. Then they all stopped moving, completely frozen mid-step. Except for one girl in the back, her eyes slowly turning to face the camera directly, and Nora's stomach dropped because she knew that face. She'd seen it in dozens of newspaper clippings. That was Marla Jennings, class president, one of the missing, and now she was blinking on tape from a feed that shouldn't exist, in a building with no power. As Marla raised one hand, pointing behind the camera's perspective, the screen cut to black. A single frame flashing with a crude white outline of the school blueprints and one word scribbled across it in red. Below, Nora yanked the tape out and pocketed it, heart hammering, and ran back to the maintenance tunnel she discovered the night before, now fully committing to going deeper, lower, where the air smelled like mildew and the walls pulsed with some electrical hum that wasn't coming from any power source she could identify. And then she saw it, a door marked drill room, carved not with letters, but scorched into the metal as if with a branding iron, and her flashlight flickered violently as she pushed it open, revealing a chamber covered in old school posters, fire escape maps, and handwritten notes from students with dates from March 1989. Like time had frozen inside, desks and chairs arranged in perfect formation around a rusted speaker mounted above a chalkboard, and on that chalkboard were the names of all 42 students who had participated in the fire drill, but 19 of them were crossed out in thick red lines. And beside each name was a time code and a cryptic word: lost, stuck, repeat. She took photos, hands shaking then. Noticed the speaker clicking on with a metallic screech before a recording played, one she recognized immediately as the same voice from the tape, the principal's voice, saying begin lock sequence A, followed by the sound of running footsteps overhead. But the school had been sealed for decades, no one should be upstairs, and yet something was moving fast and heavy. Nora climbed back up through the boiler room and into the east hallway, where the wall was pulsing like it was made of stretched fabric, and then she saw a hand, small and pale, pressing from the inside of the wall itself, as though someone trapped was begging to be let out, fingers dragging down the plaster, nails catching. Before vanishing again, she froze, unable to breathe, when a locker beside her creaked open and a paper fluttered out. A yearbook page that hadn't existed before, showing the class of '89 smiling, except now. Their eyes were scribbled out, and beneath the photo, a new name was added, hers. Nora Denville, in bold black ink, no longer just the journalist, but somehow now included in the missing. She turned to run but found the hallway shifted, unfamiliar, as if the building itself had rearranged to keep her trapped. A voice from the intercom whispering, "You were always part of the fire drill." And that was when the lights cut completely and she was swallowed in thick darkness. Celia's tape ended with static, but Nora kept the recorder running, hoping the silence might break again, as if one more breath might come through from beyond. But the room only filled with the hum of the ceiling vent and the occasional click of distant hospital shoes, and something in her chest shifted, a realization too heavy to ignore. This wasn't just a case, this wasn't just memory, this was still happening. Somewhere deep under those scorched tiles and cracked walls. The fire never really ended, it just changed form, and now it was crawling up the air vents and through the floors of time. So Nora returned to Westridge High at dawn, this time alone, no permits, no caution tape, only the click of her boots and the thud of her heartbeat. She found the narrow side door still unlocked from yesterday, the same one she and Dr. Keller had slipped through, and the moment she stepped inside, the silence welcomed her like breathless lungs. Too quiet, too still, the kind that makes your ears ring from the absence of sound. She walked past the burned trophy case, past the melted intercom, until she reached the hallway that had buckled during the fire. The corridor where, according to old floor plans, the emergency drill storage used to be, but no such door existed now, just a smooth stretch of wall, uneven in shade, as if something behind it was trying to breathe. Nora pressed her palm to it and whispered, "Who's still here?" And for one impossible second, the wall felt warm, as if it had skin, and she stumbled back just as the intercom crackled to life. No wires, no electricity. Yet the same voice as always, garbled and low. "Line up, class of '89. And then a second voice joined, younger, softer. "You didn't finish the drill." Nora ran, but not away. She followed the sound, down the hall, past collapsed ceilings and moss-covered tiles, until she found the old janitor's closet, the same one Celia mentioned in the tape, and behind a row of empty shelves she found it, a metal grate barely visible. With decades of dust and a faint gust of air pulsing from within, she pried it open, descended the rusted ladder, and emerged in a concrete tunnel lit only by the weak glow of her flashlight and the strange red flicker from deeper inside. The tunnel twisted like it had grown organically, not built by hands but by time itself, walls pulsing with moisture and memory, and then the sound returned, a soft shuffle, children's shoes on concrete, laughter echoing without bodies, and there they were, shadows against the wall, 10, 15 outlines, moving in a perfect line, backpack still on. One of them turned, and Nora saw a girl with braids, her face half-burned but eyes clear. She whispered, "Don't fail the drill again," then vanished into the wall as if it had swallowed her. Nora pressed on, fingers trembling, breathing shallow, until she reached a chamber, and there, stacked neatly, were desks, textbooks, and yearbooks, all labeled 1989, untouched by ash, protected by something more powerful than fire, and on the far wall, a name was scratched in deep gouges: Kyle Mercer, the boy who was said to have lit the fire, the scapegoat of the decade. But Nora now knew it had never been him. Not really, it was the system, the project, the experiment no one talked about, and just as she lifted the yearbook marked final draft, the chamber lights flickered on. Not flickered but flared, as if the school had eyes and now saw her. The intercom roared once more. "Report to the drill zone," and she dropped the book as the floor cracked, smoke poured through vents that hadn't worked in years, and voices, young, old, overlapping, chanted, line up, finish the drill." And in that moment, Nora realized this wasn't about remembrance, it was about repetition, about something that fed on cycles, on rituals repeated, on drills never completed, and her presence was triggering the next loop. So she ran, faster than she'd ever moved, dodging phantom hands reaching from walls, Voices whispering her name, and at the latter she turned once, saw the faces of the students, transparent but pleading, stuck in an eternal hallway with no exits, victims of a system that hid its sins beneath fire reports and memorial plaques. She climbed up, slammed the grate shut, and collapsed on the floor, gasping, the intercom still faint behind the wall, whispering, "Class dismissed." But she knew it wasn't, not really, not until someone finished the drill the right way, not until the pattern broke. And as she left the school that night, the first storm in years began to roll in over Westridge, thunder crashing like footsteps overhead, and Nora knew she was not done yet, not even close. Nora didn't run this time. She stood in front of the wall that had once been solid, once cold and dead, and now trembled with heat and whispering breath. The wall pulsed like something alive, like a boundary stretched too thin, and she knew, without understanding how, that the class of '89 was inside, not dead, not alive, but suspended in something else entirely. The intercom above her clicked on again, letting out a chorus of overlapping voices, some pleading, some laughing, some reciting the school pledge in eerie synchronization, and then came the sound of footsteps marching in a perfect line, echoing from nowhere and everywhere, as if time itself was looping around the gymnasium where the fire drill had once begun. Nora stepped back slowly, her hand still holding the flashlight now flickering, and behind her, from the long-forgotten door marked boiler access. Staff only, a soft wind blew outward like a breath from underground, bringing with it the scent of burned paper and old cologne. She turned and opened the door. It groaned on its hinges, and a narrow staircase led downward into a furnace chamber long disconnected, but lit now by a strange amber glow, and at the base of the stairs was a small platform covered in ash, and scrawled across it in chalk were the words "We never left." Written again and again, some fresh, some fading. Nora's heart raced as she stepped down, her every step crunching old debris, and at the base she found lockers, rows of them, each labeled with names. Jessica Palmer, Luis Ortega, David Kim, others she recognized from her uncle's class. Lockers perfectly preserved like an underground shrine to a class the world forgot. And in one locker door's mirror was the faint reflection of a teenage girl behind her, braided hair, yearbook in hand. But when she turned around, the space was empty again, only shadows stretched long and thin, reaching toward the stairs. Nora pulled out her phone and started recording, narrating her steps, her discovery, her breaths shallow and fast. "This is real," she whispered, "they're here." And then she heard the song again, faint, melodic, the school anthem playing somewhere deep in the pipes overhead, sung not by one voice but many, in perfect childhood harmony. She followed the sound, deeper still, until the tunnel opened into what looked like an auditorium, chairs lined in rows, a projector humming, and on the screen was footage, grainy flickering, from the day of the drill, showing the students in line, laughing, waving at the camera, and then suddenly the footage glitched, skipping forward, showing empty halls, then a sudden flash of white, then darkness, then a frame stuck looping of students turning a corner that no longer existed. Nora stepped up onto the stage, looking behind the curtain where she found hundreds of school IDs laid out in a circle, like some ritual had taken place, and in the center was an old key labeled Custodial Storage Room X. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, and when she did, the screen behind her crackled again and the image changed. Not the drill footage now, but a live feed, showing the hallway above, and in it, she could see herself on the screen, watching herself from behind, and then from the corner of the frame, the silhouettes of students began to appear one by one, all facing the camera, all unmoving, all watching her. She turned around fast, but the room was empty again, cold again, the projector now off, and then the floor beneath her rumbled once, then twice, and began to collapse inward like a sinkhole. Nora ran, sprinting back through the tunnels, through the boiler room, up the narrow stairs, every light behind her dying as she passed, and as she emerged into the hallway. The wall she had stared at earlier cracked down the middle, glowing red, then burst open in silence, revealing only smoke and dozens of notebooks falling through midair, pages opening to sketches, journal entries, and drawings of the drill that never ended, of the moment time split open. And as the smoke cleared, she saw them, the students, standing perfectly still in the hallway, backs turned, not speaking, not moving, just facing the lockers, every one of them older now, not children anymore, but 35 years older, their faces aged but their clothes the same, as if trapped in bodies that kept moving even while time had frozen them. Nora froze, whispering her uncle's name, and one figure turned slowly, his face pale, his eyes hollow, and he whispered, "We were told not to move," then vanished again into the wall like mist. The others followed, one by one, dissolving into the lockers, into the floor tiles, into the vents above, until the hallway was empty once more. But the names on the lockers were different now, Not the names from 1989, but names she didn't recognize, names of students enrolled now in 2025, including her nieces, and at that moment, the intercom clicked again, one final time, and said in a deep unfamiliar voice, "Next sequence initiated," and then silence, complete and terrifying. Nora dropped to her knees, overwhelmed. Unsure if she had ended the loop or stepped into its next chapter. Unsure if the school had ever truly been empty or if it had just been waiting for the right time to echo again. And somewhere down the hall, a bell rang once, and the lights flickered back on.